a study on the perceptions of German and Indian users in the evaluation of vehicle instrument cluster designs by Pratap Kalinali Sudarshan, Michaela Kauer, and Ralph Bruder from the Institute for Arbeitswissenschaft TU Darmstadt. The emergence of the global marketplace has resulted in cross-cultural differences being increasingly recognized as a key factor in successful adoption of new products. Also, given the fact that often design teams from one culture design products for users in another culture, or maybe an unfamiliar culture, makes it important to take cultural aspects into consideration during design. So, among all the different aspects that can be taken into consideration, the difference in perception of products is one of them. The objective of this study was to explore the differences in perception of vehicle instrument cluster designs between Indian and German users. Through this study, we try and see how users from these two cultures perceive and differentiate the different designs, and from that, maybe understand the product attributes they value. We are considering the cluster instruments here because designers express the general look of the car also through the instrument clusters. So we thought it could be something comparable across the two cultures. We used the Repertory Grid Technique to interview the users, as illustrated in the work of Tomiko and his colleagues in 2009. One of the advantages of using this technique is that information obtained from the interviews allow for statistical analysis without losing out on the individuality of the results. So in this case, we compared the classified data along three parameters of dominance, importance, and descriptive richness, again going by the reference paper we had of Tomiko and his colleagues in 2009. In this study, we had 13 users each from India and Germany, who were all non-design graduate students aged between 22 and 32 years. We had 6 cluster instrument designs as stimulus. All 6 of these designs belonged to the hatchback segment of cars. And of the 6, we had 2 designs from Germany, 2 designs from India, and 2 unique and unconventional designs. The repertory grid interview for this study involved the use of triading and laddering approaches to get the user to elicit constructs. Then the user was asked to mark the 3 most important and 3 least important of the constructs elicited. Following these identification of the most important and least important constructs, the users rated each of the products along the lines of the constructs they just elicited. The final step of the interview involved the ranking of the products based on preference and a short discussion or reasoning for their ranking. With this process, we had in total about 248 constructs for the Indian users and about 184 constructs from the 13 German users. So once we had all the constructs from the users, we classified them into various categories, and the categories were grouped under 3 overall categories of pragmatic, stimulation, and identification. Here we had a table showing the overall categories, subcategories, and some examples of the constructs under each of them. So for example, we have pragmatic category which deals with the instrumental aspects of the design. So we're looking at usability, layout and presentation, facts and telltales. Similarly, we have the identification category, which was defined by the ability to express oneself through the products owned, and which had constructs such as sporty, expensive, premiumness, etc. being elicited. As mentioned, the classified data was compared along parameters of dominance, importance, and descriptive richness. Dominance was calculated through a relative percentage of a given category. Importance was to just understand the importance of a given category of constructs, and it was calculated through the weighted average method. And finally, the descriptive richness was calculated through the hierarchical cluster analysis on one side and a qualitative content analysis to identify the reach of a particular category. Here we have a table showing the descriptive richness of the different thematic categories. To make for easier comparison, we coded all differences we had in terms of numbers as symbols. So we had all strong differences being coded as a double plus and double minus, and all weak differences coded as a single plus and single minus. For example, for dominance, a difference of greater than equal to 5% was considered strong. Similarly, for importance, a difference of greater than equal to 0.05 was considered strong. Whereas the descriptive richness, since it's related to the other two indices, it is sort of redundant in this case. Looking at the results, we find that the pragmatic qualities were dominant and important for both Indians and Germans. This sort of concurs with previous established literature on technology acceptance and also on some user experience literature. Usability was more important and dominant for Germans than for Indians. The somewhat counterintuitive layout score suggests that Germans wanted to see if all elements were present in the right way, therefore was more dominant. But the layout of elements itself, to say the actual positioning of the various elements, was considered to be something that one must get used to and therefore less important. And this was referring to the German side. An interesting aspect was that Indians placed more importance and it was more dominant also when it came to the non-standard telltales. This is because there were many elements which they thought were new and non-standard to the cars they drove in before, which in reality were pretty standard for the Germans. The biggest point of difference between the two groups was with the identification category. The Indians placing more importance to identification suggests that Indians were more concerned about the social consideration of product use. This is further emphasized by the descriptive richness, where one sees the Indians were descriptively richer with the terms used for identification compared to the Germans. The stimulation category showed no strong differences for dominance of form, but a strong favoring in terms of aesthetics when you look at the importance side. And this strong favoring was happening towards the Germans. Looking into the rankings and the reasoning as to why the strong importance for the Germans is the rating of all these designs. As you recall, we had the users do a rating of all the 6 designs. And again, as you recall, we had 2 unconventional designs amongst the 6. These 2 unconventional or unique designs received very bad ratings and rankings from the Germans. And again, as we had a quick discussion about their rankings, they always suggested they found these forms too unfamiliar, too different, and they would not associate it with having it in a car. So therefore we could say that the Germans prefer something more conservative, both in terms of form and color for an instrument cluster. So concluding on the results of the study, the pragmatic aspects were considered important for both groups. Differences were found in the identification category, where social consideration was far more important for Indians rather than Germans. Germans preferred more conservative forms and color combinations in comparison to Indians, if we go by the ranking and ratings we just spoke about. So we have findings like this. What are the design implications? How do we actually use this kind of information for actual design? So if you were to design cluster instruments for these 2 cultures based on this study, the first thing we would do is have the layout presentation being simple and understandable so that the basic pragmatic values are met. Specifically for Indians, we would look at keeping the identification factors in mind and trying to express these identification factors through form and color combination, where you have little more scope to experimenting with form. Specific to Germans, would want to keep things conservative, make things which are identifiable, which they associate in a given environment, and again, traditional forms, subtle colors, subtle color combinations, very light accents and highlights, etc. As a future scope of this work, we are looking to compare designers in the two cultures to see if design education has neutralized some of the cultural influences. And further, we intend to compare designers and non-designers within and across cultures so as to enable the designer to better understand the target user's perceptions for design. Here are a list of references we used in this presentation. A full list of references which we used for the study itself is included in the associated paper which is in review. Thank you.